That feeling, it's that deep, almost physical tremor in your chest, the sudden, sharp awareness that the ground beneath your feet isn't solid anymore. It's not fear exactly, not the paralyzing kind, but a profound, unsettling recognition. It's the sense that the map you were using, the one you thought was definitive, the one you used to navigate your days, your ambitions, your very sense of right and wrong, is suddenly dissolving. It's the moment you realize you've been operating on a set of internal rules that, when viewed through a different lens, suddenly look like sandcastles. We're talking about the book, the truth, and the scales of justice. It sounds so grand, so theological, like something reserved for distant mountains or ancient texts. But when you strip it down, what it really speaks to is the architecture of human morality. It's the blueprint for how we decide what is good and what is bad, what is fair and what is unjust. And the question hanging in the air, what will make you realize that the hour might well have drawn near? That's not a question about a specific date on a calendar. That's a question about the calibration of our internal compass. It's about the moment the internal mechanism stops just suggesting a direction and starts demanding a course correction. Think about it like this. Imagine you're trying to balance a massive, intricate knot of yarn. This knot represents your life, your choices, your accumulated actions. For a long time, you've been pulling the threads in one direction, tightening the loops, believing that if you just pull hard enough, you'll achieve a perfect, secure structure. That's the comfortable, self-serving way of living, isn't it? You're focused on the immediate tension, the immediate gain, the immediate relief. You're treating the knot like a simple rope, something you can brute force into shape. But the book, the truth, it's like someone handing you a set of incredibly precise, microscopic measuring tools. It doesn't tell you how to pull. It tells you where the tension needs to be applied. It introduces the concept of the scales of justice. These scales aren't just symbols. They are the mechanism by which we measure the weight of our actions against the weight of our intentions. When you're living purely on self-interest, on the immediate gratification of the pull, you're ignoring the weight entirely. You're only concerned with the tension in your own hands. The realization that the hour might be near isn't a sudden, dramatic lightning strike. It's a slow, creeping realization that the knot you've been weaving is fundamentally unbalanced. It's the moment you stop focusing on the immediate pull and start noticing the distribution of the tension. You start seeing the threads that are frayed, the loops that are too tight, the sections where the weight has been deliberately shifted away from the center. It's the psychological shift from being a mere participant in the tension to being the observer of the imbalance. This brings me to the psychological layer. We all have a future, that natural capacity for carelessness, for letting the internal mechanism slip. We let the noise of the world, the endless demands for acquisition, the seductive ease of self-deception, drown out the quiet, insistent voice of our conscience. We become so busy managing the external appearance of order that we forget to check the internal balance. We mistake activity for alignment. We mistake motion for meaning. And that's where I get stuck, and this is where I feel the real pressure. I look at this idea of a divine standard, a perfect scale, and I have to ask myself, if I'm operating purely on my own internal logic, on my own definition of good and just, isn't that just a more sophisticated form of self-interest? Isn't the pursuit of personal well-being, the desire to avoid suffering, the drive to build something lasting, all just highly refined forms of self-interest? If the ultimate measure of reality is this divine standard, how can we ever truly know if we're hitting it? Isn't the very act of seeking that standard just another form of striving, another kind of striving that keeps us busy, keeps us moving, keeps us from staring at the knot and admitting it's tangled? The answer, I think, lies in the difference between striving and alignment. Striving is the frantic pulling of the yarn, the exhausting effort to force the knot into a shape that looks right. Alignment, the lived experience of what the book describes, is not about the force you apply. It's about the nature of the pull itself. It's about whether the tension you feel is a productive, stabilizing force or a destructive, self-consuming one. It's the difference between trying to force a piece of metal into a mold and understanding the inherent properties of the metal so you can shape it with minimal, precise effort. Let's zoom in on the word believer. It's not about a declaration whispered in a moment of high emotion. It's about the consistent, quiet behavior of someone who sees the fire and steps back. It's the recognition that the heat is real, that the danger is present, and the response isn't panic, but a deliberate, measured withdrawal to assess the environment. That withdrawal is the act of recognizing the scale. It's the moment you stop trying to control the knot and start learning to read the tension. The structure of this realization is sequential. First, there is the external stimulus, the book, the standard. Second, there is the internal friction, the recognition of your own tendency toward future, the urge to simplify the knot. Third, there is the shift in perspective, seeing the knot not as a problem to be solved by brute force, but as a system to be understood through its inherent dynamics. So the opening hook returns. That physical tremor in the chest, that unsettling awareness that the map is dissolving. But now, instead of seeing it as a sign of impending doom, I see it as the precise moment the measuring tools, the truth and the scales, have finally been handed to me. The knot isn't necessarily broken. It's just that I was using the wrong tool to measure it. If the realization isn't about some external event signaling an end, but about the internal calibration shifting from self-interest to responsibility, then the hour isn't a clock ticking down. It's the moment the internal mechanism finally stops running on borrowed momentum and starts running on the correct fuel. And so, I leave you with this. If the realization of the hour isn't a dramatic arrival, but a quiet, internal shift in how you perceive the tension in your own life, what does that quiet shift look like in the mundane, everyday act of simply choosing your next breath?